The England gig you're talking about would be the Ozzy Osbourne Black Sabbath, the Back to the Beginning, which we knew was going to be the farewell for both Black Sabbath and Ozzy.
Sword of Omens, come to my hand. I, Lion-O, command it. Thundercats, ho!
All right, everybody. Good afternoon. It is 3 o'clock. Phones down. That's usually what you have to say to your young kids. For a long time, we've been doing that. So my name is Matt Herring. I am a podcaster writer, and I am joined right now, obviously, by two guys that most people know, and that is Chris Poland and David Ellefson. So,
hi, everybody.
Let's hear it for those guys. Nice. It's been a really interesting time over the last week. Chris and I have known each other for about 2 years. We've been working on a book together, which is 99.8% done. We're finishing the last chapter this week as we are going through Terrificon. Dave's got a couple books out, but I've just met Dave like 3 weeks ago. Picked you up at Boston. Talk about your little bit of an interesting, maybe couple weeks that you had, or maybe even a month, starting with being over in England.
Sure. Actually, I think we met a week ago.
Yes.
That was one of the things Nick Menza used to say. We'd be somewhere for like a day off. He goes, "Oh my God, I spent a year in Connecticut one day." Because it was like, how much can you do? And you end up doing a lot. But hi everybody, how are you? Yeah, I got here, flew into Boston. Matt kindly picked me up. We drove 3 hours through the rain. And just been camped out here. And went to hang with Deep Purple, or the Beyond Purple. Pantera and Amon Amarth guys were around, so it's kind of like we're all friends. We all grew up together, and somebody said, "Did anybody see the live stream of that?" No, you've probably seen it through your social media. Someone once said that was the one day we didn't have to read anything about politics on social media. Ozzy Osbourne dying finally brought everybody together over something we love and celebrate, and a person who united rather than someone who divides, So I thought that was very poignant. There's so much stuff on the internet that can be so opinionated, but I think we all came together over Ozzy's music and his life. So we went into that knowing that, he was sick and he was Parkinson's, and that was not something he was going to survive, and as all of us get to an age, we know the end is coming. But to be part of that event was really great, and some superstars there: Sammy Hagar, Steven Tyler, Metallica. The big Brian May was there. The biggest of the big were there, and yet everybody. It was a level playing field for everybody. Whether you'd sold millions of records or a few hundred records, you were all on the same playing field. And that's not something that happens very often in our line of work in entertainment. But it was really great that it was done like that. And so I'm super honored to have been part of it and play with a hero of mine, Jakey Lee. I saw Jakey Lee when he had just joined Ozzy's band in my senior year of high school in 1982. I saw him in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. He had just joined Ozzy's band, and then I went off to California about 9 months later after I graduated high school in the summer of 1983, and met this character upstairs named Dave Mustaine of my apartment, and he was in a band called Metallica that none of us had heard of, because this is the origin story of our genre, really, thrash metal. And we started Megadeth together, and here we are, all these years later. So I think for me, moving to California was so important, largely because watching Ozzy was getting his musicians from Los Angeles out of Hollywood. We learned of Quiet Riot through Randy Rhoads and Rudy Sarzo. We learned of Night Ranger. Randy Rhoads, one of his replacements was Brad Gillis, who his new band, who we hadn't heard of yet, was Night Ranger. And And then Jakey Lee got the gig after Brad, and he was in a band called Rat and Rough Cut. And, so by the time I got to L.A. in 1983, and Chris had already been there, Chris and his friend Gar Samuelson, who were both in Megadeth together. We were all together at the same time. Really it was that stable of musicians that really called to guys like me who loved hard rock and heavy metal, and that really drew us out to California. And there was a music school there called the Musicians Institute that I told my parents I was going to do that, but really that was the plan. That was like plan C or D, but down the list. Plan A was, let's go out to California and start a heavy metal band. And, lo and behold, it worked for me. And I think on some level, and I'll pass with this, but I think on some level, when you're in the creative world or, something gnaws at you and you just sort of follow the crumbs, and you go and people ask, well, what would you do if you weren't a bass player? It's like, I never thought of anything else. I mean, it just never was anything else an option. And I think that's a God-given divine thing, probably you lead a lot of the actors and the artists here. There's something that calls you into this crazy creative world, and, to do normal things is kind of not really ever it's just kind of not in your front sight. I say normal meaning, our parents, you need to get a job, you need to do this, you need to do that, and to some degree, obviously, you have to pay your bills. But, I think if you have the creative consciousness, that will always draw you to that, So anyway, that's my story. I'm sticking with it. Yeah.
And it's funny when you think about your side going to California, your story to get out there. I'll just have to play dumb because I know the story. We've been talking about this with this book. Your story getting out to California was sort of the same because of the motivation to get out there to play music and be in a better environment. But when you got out there, it wasn't, the guys that Dave was mentioning weren't even on the scene yet. There was no hard rock scene. You were there because you were a fusion player and you wanted to play fusion.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My wheelhouse is definitely not David's. I liked rock guys when I was growing up. Zeppelin, Hendrix, Trower, Mountain, all that kind of guitar playing. But then one day, me and Gar heard fusion. We heard Jeff Beck's solo record, Blow by Blow. Then we started listening to the Tony Williams Lifetime with Alan Holdsworth. And metal just wasn't in my wheelhouse, and it wasn't in Gar's either. But, we did, when we were kids, we were trying to be Deep Purple, for a minute. Then we tried to be whatever rock songs we were trying to learn. But once we started learning Billy Cobham songs and stuff like that, we never looked back, and that's why we moved to California, was to be a fusion band. So the fact that we joined Megadeth was the strangest thing that ever happened, I think, because it had something to do with Jay Jones. He managed both Megadeth, or Dave Mustaine, and us. And he knew Gar could play it, and Gar told me, you got to hear it. And I thought to myself, man, that's like kind of what we do, sort of. I mean, it's very progressive, super hard to play, never boring. And so I was in. But as far as, music, we have a totally different background. And that might be why the first two records are what they are. Yeah. But I don't think I answered your question.
Oh, no, that was it. We're now today. And here we are now.
Yeah.
When you think about that whole era and how you guys all got together, you already had the band going. It was you, Dave. You had a kind of a rotating cast of drummers. You also had Kerry King on guitar. You were trying to find a singer, trying to find another guitar player. And when you finally got Gar, you guys started to get that little thing going, and you got there. Chris told me some stories of him roadieing, being there with Gar and you guys. And what do you remember about hearing Chris that first time play?
So, well, first of all, like I said yesterday in an interview, and I saw it yesterday, we did a show over, it was at East Haven, North Haven? Hamden, okay. And, Chris is the kind of guy that he'll just plug his guitar in and hit a note just to get some tone out of the amplifier. And everybody goes, what is that? Oh, my God, who is that? And that is a special thing to have, you know, that when you hear someone sing, I mean, it could be Kenny G on the saxophone. It could be, you know, David Lee Roth from Van Halen. Whoever that is, when to have that. And I think it's maybe a little harder with an instrument because, you know, the instrument becomes our voice. You know, the bass guitar has become my voice. You know, Chris has said a lot of times, dude, your bass sound is the sound of Megadeth.
Oh, not only that, but Dave Ellefson has his own bass sound, and you can hear it after 2 notes. Anything you play on, I know it's you as soon as I hear it.
Which is really great to have that. And, you know, speaking to what Chris said, you know, when I was playing bass, I'm a rock metal guy. I grew up with Aerosmith and Sweet and Styx and Kiss and this kind of stuff. Like a few years behind, because I'm a couple years younger than Chris. So I grew up a little bit behind what Gar and Chris were listening to. And I was the youngest guy in Megadeth at the time. I was like 18 or 19, I think. And, you know, Mustaine was 3 or 4 years older than me as well. But, you know, I think for me, I started playing jazz band in high school. So I got turned on to Return to Forever and Stanley Clarke and Billy Cobham and the same kind of stuff that Gar and Chris were playing. I was a fan of it, right? So I was studying it because I wanted to become a better bass player. And I found that when I saw Maynard Ferguson play, and there's this guy, Gordon Johnson, who was a Minneapolis bass player. When I saw him play, you know, Rush was probably the most progressive thing that I had heard. Rush and Yes, which is out of this world great. But I saw Maynard Ferguson, and I'm like, game over. You know, what page in the book is that, you know? So that really got me inspired to, you know, Al Di Meola was probably my guy because he kind of had more of a rock electric thing that I really liked. But he was, and I kind of, a lot of my bass playing, I kind of take a lot of his staccato playing, his picking style from Al Di Meola. So I think when Gar and Chris came into Megadeth, you know, to me it was very comfortable. You know, I could me and Dave Mustaine, you know, we liked UFO and Iron Maiden and, you know, that, but I could also understand the language that Gar and Chris were speaking through fusion music, and I think that kind of made me the guy in the middle a little bit with that.
You're totally right, man, because your right hand is just so solid, man. It's like there is no slop.
Well, and you know, it's funny. You know, I became a plectrum bass player, and I played a little bit with a pick as a kid in my bands in Minnesota, mostly because you could get heard. You could hit it hard enough and be heard through. You know, guitar players they can use a 50-watt amp and blow the roof off this place. A bass player needs 300 to 1,000 watts to get that. And you know, I had some gear, of course, but I couldn't afford the big, you know, loud bass amplifiers. So I was building my own PA and shop class, you know, and I was going, what does Gene Simmons use? I want that, but I can't afford that. So how do I get close to that, you know? So, you know, so I think as a bass player, I part of it was, you know, Steve Harris from Iron Maiden has this very percussive tone. As it turns out, he doesn't pluck really hard. He just he almost is tapping the strings like that, and that's his sound, right? And where I was having to, you know, and the harder you play, the less kind of good you play, in my opinion. You know what I mean? So anyway, the plectrum became my thing. And then when we were doing Megadeth, I remember going in the studio. And, you know, the studio for me is where, you know, that I've probably become, that has been probably my best educator, is being in the studio, working with different musicians, different producers. And really early on with Jay Jones, I remember we did a midnight session on Hollywood Boulevard. We're trying to record these first 3 Megadeth songs to make a demo. And that was, you know, when you go in the studio will reflect, it's a mirror. It reflects back to you very quickly, your strengths and especially your weaknesses. And that was probably one of the best teachers for me. And I've probably been educated more by making records. That has really tightened me up as a player. And I can tell when I play with musicians who have had good studio experience and those who just haven't had that experience, they're very different. They're different musicians, you know, and it's just experience. It's all that it is. So, you know, Chris and I we grew up, making records that didn't have a lot of time. We didn't have a lot of money. So you have to go in and really be as good as you can. And that's why our second record, Peace Sells But Who's Buying, was a very different record from our first album. Our first album is always kind of the one you're figuring it out. And the Peace Sells album, our agent, Andy Summers, put us out on tour for about a month. And we played, it was before we recorded Peace Sells But Who's Buying in 1986. And so we had to play, and we were headlining, so we had to play every song that we had, which is, I think, 8 songs from our first album, and these new 8 songs that would become Peace Sells But Who's Buying. We had to play everything we knew. And doing that tour really tightened us up. So when we came home off the road, we went right in the studio and recorded the Peace Sells album, and we really played well together as a band. There's some overdubs on there, but for the most part, you can really hear the songs are good. We knew every night when we started Peace Sells, we knew that was going to be a hit. You could just feel it in the room. The room changed. We'd play this mid-tempo, this kind of start with the bass drum, and then I'd play the bass line, and we'd get into it, and you could just go, wow, I think we got something here.
Yeah.
When you first joined and got with everybody, and it was Gar, and you had a long time relationship with Gar. You were, I guess, boyhood friends. Yeah. He joins Megadeth. You joined Megadeth.
Right.
What were your first thoughts? I mean, again, you are a fusion player. You are Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Right.
You are not Deep Purple. What was it for you that made that connection where you're like, you know what, I can add my background into this and make it what it became?
It's when I saw them at the Waters Club, I think. Yeah. I saw them, and I knew they needed another guitar player. But that's when I knew that I could play that and I could enjoy it. But it wasn't until I went up to San Francisco as a roadie when they played the Stone. It was the Stone, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I saw, I think it was Slayer. Who was playing rhythm guitar?
Oh, was that Kerry King?
Was it Kerry King at that game?
No, not Kerry King was before you had. I think we might have been a 3-piece.
I was up there,
and
I couldn't believe the audience reaction. I was just blown away and it was a full room, and it was just like, what is going on? But I had already made my commitment to do it because I liked what I heard, and Gar told me it's really good. It's really fun to play. It's really challenging, and so that's why I was involved.
It was fun and violent at the same time.
Yeah, but it's the audience that really that was my I'm in, because I've never seen an audience that loved a band that much.
I'll say this about Chris's playing, and those of you who own Megadeth records, his style is really what juxtaposed the really variant sound of the guitars in Megadeth, right? Dave is this real Ted Nugent, Jimmy Page, kind of bluesy, from the hip player, and I'm talking as a lead guitar player. And then Chris had this very smooth legato, this nice lush sound, and that established that. So even as lineup changes happened over the years, the next guy was always benchmarked to Chris's sound, and to define the sound of a group is really that's very challenging to do,
It's like you said, it was fated. It was fate that all of us got together. It wasn't planned. There's no way Dave planned this.
No.
Yeah.
If we look at where we are now, we can think back to yesterday. And by the way, if anybody has any questions, please let me know. Raise your hand. Come up to the mic. These are recorded. So over the next couple months now, if you're running from the law or you're not supposed to be here, then maybe you don't want to come up to the mic, but come up to the mic, ask them questions. Because after a while, I'm going to start, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite TV show?
You.
But last night, you guys did a bass story.
Right.
Or is it bass story?
Bass story.
Bass story, yeah. And what that is Dave comes out, he brings a local band, which were amazing. You had some great guys last night. And you go through the songs that influenced you. You go through songs from your history, from your songbook. And it was amazing because Chris came out, and this is the first time I got to see Chris play. And you played 3 songs. You came out with Paranoid. They did a Black Sabbath cover. Never Say Die was fantastic, by the way. I know you weren't on that one,
Yeah.
but holy cow, that was
Isn't that a
amazing.
fun song?
It's punk Black Sabbath, and I was a big punk guy, but I'll get into that a little bit. But what was it like for you to get back out there on stage? And I know you've done it with Kings of Thrash, but what is it like for you to have to wind yourself up and get back into that metal mode? You know, you're a week before you're at your studio, you're hanging out with your wife, hanging out with your kids, chasing your puppy, trying to keep the cat from getting attacked by the dog. All these things going on, and here you are going right back to that young, volatile time in your life.
What I do is I make sure I have to have a guitar in my hands at least 30 minutes before I play, and I have to get my hand used to that idea. And I get my hand going, and I'm not even playing anything. I'm just making sure I'm hitting a fret and that my pick and my fingers are hitting the neck at the same time. And I just do that over and over again so that when I go out there and I actually think about playing something, both hands are like, okay, I think I know what we're going to do, you know. But mentally, I just wing it, man. I just, I try and remember the parts. I hadn't played Wake Up Dead in a while, and I was so busy at home and at work that I went through it a couple times, but I had forgotten how fast that song is. And so that was a struggle, but the rest of it was so much fun. And that was fun too, man. But the most fun I had last night was just being able to just open up on the intro to Boots. That I haven't been able to do that. And even when we were in Kings, I never got to do that because of whatever happened. And last night, it was like, wow, I can just do whatever I want right now.
So you know the song "These Boots Are Made for Walking" that we put on the "Killing Is My Business" record right there. As a Nancy Sinatra cover. Our manager Jay Jones, he'd have these random ideas. Hey, let's do a Nancy Sinatra song, and it was really good because there was always kind of a tongue-in-cheek, humorous thing. Dave Mustaine could pull it off, because he had a funny sense of humor that he could change words and sing it. But yeah, it was 4 songs because that we always like to do that. The intro, when you hear Chris do the beginning of that, I mean, this is like watching, you're watching one of the greats. You really are. You're watching one of the greats do what greats do, which is change the room. I always say this about singers. There's some guys, Corey Taylor from Slipknot, Lizzie Hale, Dave Draymond from Disturbed. There's guys, when you get on stage with them, the room changes when they're up there singing. John Bush from Anthrax, Armored Saints, another one. And these are just guys from, my generation. But and Chris is like that when we play. And These Boots Are Made for Walking it's just kind of it's a swing beat, it's a walking bass line, and it works better with one guitar. Actually, we've tried to do it in Kings of Thrash, and it works there too, but it's just a different thing because it's more of a trade between two guys, between Chris and Jeff Young. But so we've taken that to Australia with Chris. We've done stuff across the USA. But it was fun last night to just stand off on the side and just let you just rip, just go for it,
Oh, and Opus, totally solid.
Great, isn't he?
Yeah,
the drummer.
solid
Yeah.
drummer.
To me, a band is as good as the drummer.
Always.
And I remember a friend of mine one time, when the drummer from REM had his brain issue and he had to step back from the band, and he said, that guy is so good you don't even notice him. And I went, you're right. A drummer that's so good that he's so solid that you can either be Neil Peart, obviously, you're just right up front, you're that guy, and that's impressive as well. But sometimes the best drummers are the ones that are just back there just holding it down. Yeah. They're not getting in the way. And it's like, that's how good they are. Because as a musician on the stage, that's the anchor.
Steve Gadd.
Another one, exactly. Yep.
One of the really cool things, and this maybe hopefully will get you all kind of jealous, but writing with Chris and doing this book and getting to know Dave, who's helped out a lot of, kind of finishing some stories. Chris would have a great story and be like, oh my God, and I'm hearing this and I'm laughing so hard as it's coming together. And then Chris would be like, I don't remember how it ended. and then he's like, get with Ellefson, he'll remember that. And it started, I think I called Dave one time and we talked about a couple stories, and then it ended up being, I'm going to call you back with about 15 of these because Chris is coming up with these funny stories that he doesn't remember the ends of. But other than that, last night, hearing you guys playing downstairs and you're playing Devil's Island, and I was up in the room with Chris, and Chris wasn't plugged in. He was just warming up playing Devil's Island. And I was hearing basically an acoustic version of Devil's Island with you guys downstairs. And again, it's one of those things where you just, that group of musicians you had last night, and they're all local, which just shows you how awesome our music scene is out here. You can't create unity. You can't create that excitement. And that crowd was out of control in a great way. It was so much fun. You could feel it. For Bass Story, what is that thing that you really like the most about it? Because you get to tell stories and you're picking your music.
So the Bass Story thing started. There's a promoter in Australia who brought me down there, and he said, come down to do a spoken word. And I just put out my first, my memoir, My Life with Death. And I'm thinking, I'm not the kind of guy who's going to like sip tea and sit around and, you know, read my book like, you know, Honey, I Married an Axe Murderer, right? Remember that Mike Myers, right? He's in the coffee shop. And so I thought, well, if I bring my bass, that's my best friend. You know, I can probably wiggle my way out of any difficult situation. As long as I have a bass, I'll figure it out, right? Because I play some songs and that's where it started. So as I did this tour across Australia, I would have there was a band, like a support band, you know, that would play. And then I'd get up and sometimes, you know, play along to some tracks on a CD player, a laptop or whatever. And that's about as unengaging as you can get, you know, because, you know, there's a producer that worked with Megadeth and actually did the first couple Ozzy Osbourne records. His name is Max Norman. And I did a podcast with him, and he had the best thing. He goes, and he's British, right? He goes, you know, it's about having a musical conversation between the musicians, you know? And I thought, that's brilliant. I'm going to definitely steal that from you because that is what it is. It's about being in the room, playing off of each, just like we're doing here, you know, that we can engage and we can communicate. And so as I got, then a promoter, an agent took me across Europe, and every day I'd have a different support band play with me in Turkey and wherever. And it's how I got reconnected again with KK Downing from Judas Priest. A friend of mine in Phoenix had reconnected us. I always got on well with KK when Megadeth would tour with Judas Priest, like on the Painkiller, Rest in Peace album, and we did a lot of shows with them over the years. And I hit KK and I said, hey, I need a Bass Story show in England. I don't have one. I said, he's got a venue there called KK Steel Mill. And it's about 1,200 seat venue. And I said, what is it? Like, how big is it? What is it? And he helped me build the show. He helped me build ticket prices. Like, he really knew the business. And so I kind of found like he was a kindred spirit because we kind of think alike like that. He's no dummy to the business. And I kept inviting him. I said, hey, do you want to come up and jam? You want to play like Living After Midnight? He goes, right, mate, I don't know. We'll see, mate. You know, and he's very sweet and kind. And then as it got closer, we brought Tim Ripper Owens over. Then we got on the phone and we found out this drummer, Les Binks, who, you know, there are two really great drummers in the early days. Simon Phillips played on and then Les Binks. And they apparently were like the two London session musicians. And so Les was in Judas Priest for a couple of my favorite records, Stained Glass and Hellbent for Leather, and they did the live album Unleashed in the East with Les. And so I was like, oh my gosh, Les is still around, you know. So I said, can we just play like a certain, you know, I listed off some songs, and I said, I'll die and go to Headbanger Heaven, and I'll never bother any of you ever again. You know, so this is like a dream gig, you know. So we basically put together my band played. I brought some musicians with me, and then we peeled off the stage, and then me and KK Downing came out and played like an entire night of Judas Priest songs with Les Binks and Tim Ripper Owens. And I mean, I was like basically joined Judas Priest for a night, you know. And it was the shot heard around the world. It was so cool, and that essentially got KK excited again. And then he put together KK's Priest and had another run at it. And I love doing that. I love getting guys out of the house. Even Chris, it's like, dude, get out here. Come on, let's go. You know, and even like with Devil's Island or whatever, you know, it's like, hey, do you want to play Devil's Island or you want to play this? He goes, oh, I don't know. And I said, all right, we'll keep it easy. If you're inclined to do it, jump in. Yeah. And, you know, because I know what it's like to, you know, it's like, I don't know if I know that song or I haven't been out on the road much lately. And, you know, it is. Like you say, you're at home petting the dog and the cat and hanging out doing domestic stuff, and then all of a sudden you walk out on stage, and it is such a different experience. I mean, you have morphed into another reality. But once we do it, even seeing Ozzy after he played last month, saw him right after he'd played the show, and he was beaming. It was like he was a different guy than we saw even an hour before on the stage. It's like, oh my God, Ozzy's going to be with us for another 10 years. And it's that after show glow, that we all get, and everybody's pumped and excited, and so that's one of the gifts that we get from this. So the Bass Story thing has provided a really great. I went to South America with it. I did, but what it taught me was every night I'd have a new band. So it's Chuck Berry, Chuck Berry does this, right? He goes around and just uses local pickup musicians who are good players. But every day, I'd run through a handful of Megadeth songs, and these guys, there's kids younger than, young kids learn how to play guitar on YouTube now. And as good as we were back in the day, pushing the envelope, these kids play circles around us now. They just blazing. So these, everybody knew the songs. They were thrilled to be, just like last night, they're thrilled to be on stage with me and Chris, and it's a cool thing. And that's what it turned out to be, is me playing some songs, telling some stories. And then I thought, let me play some of the songs that I grew up with, Iron Maiden, Van Halen, Kiss. Let me sort of tell the story. The story of my bass career is basically what it is. So hence the word Bass Story.
Yeah. And you played Crocus.
Crocus.
That was, I will say this now, I mean, I finally have admitted this to people in the world on my music podcast. I like Crocus way better than AC/DC. And they were the band that was always, Crocus is just an AC/DC ripoff. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
AC/DC is a wannabe Crocus.
When I first saw Crocus, it was when I was in high school. I went to go see Rainbow. I was a big Rainbow fan because of Ronnie James Dio. Well, now he was out. Joe Lynn Turner was in. And it was a cool record that they did. And then Pat Travers. And Pat Travers had that great band with Tommy Aldrich and Pat Thrall and Mars Colling. They were great. They were kind of almost fusion-ish. They were super, super good. Well, Pat Thrall's out of the band, Tommy Aldrich out of the band. So the tour I caught was sort of the reinvented Pat Travers. Rainbow, was great. But the opening band was this little band from Europe I'd never heard of called Crocus. And it was before the hits, because then they got in the studio with the Judas Priest producer, and they had all the big hits, and they were on MTV, and their career took off. But there was something really kind of cool and grungy about them that I liked. And what I loved is the bass player stood over here on the stage left of the drummer, and they did a bass and drum solo. He had some rototoms, any drummers know what that is. He had some rototoms next to the drummer, so as if he's standing here playing, when they did the drum solo, he turned to the drummer, and the drummer and the bass player did a drum solo. The bass player wasn't playing bass, he was playing drums.
That's awesome.
I thought, that is the coolest thing. So I ripped that idea off when we did the Euthanasia record, when we went on tour and we did the song Reckoning Day. I said, bring it, I want a drum out here so I can play the intro with Nick Menza. That's where I got that idea, was from Crocus.
That's awesome.
So, you never know stuff you see and plagiarize later.
Yeah, well, no, it's just part of it.
It is, yeah.
So who's got some questions? Is anybody, and I won't make you stand up. If you've got a question, just raise your hand and ask it. Don't be shy. If not, I got a million of these. I could keep going all day. But I guess, Chris, this is your second time back here at Terrificon. You were here last year, had a blast. And for you, what is it like to kind of reconnect with people that might not know what you've been up to since the Megadeth days? Like, for you, a lot of it, the music you're doing, it's very local in Connecticut, local in California, playing the baked potato. You've got Ohm going. Mm-hmm. So what is it like for you to kind of meet people that have not caught up with you over the last bunch of years?
It's like I said before, Megadeth fans they're just forever fans. And I know when I see somebody coming up to the table, I can see it in their eyes. They're a Megadeth fan. and they're going to be Megadeth fans when they're taking their last breath. So for me, it's just, I love it. I'm just, I'm blessed is all I can say. I honestly think that the music business is 90% luck. and the other 10% is being ready. And I was lucky to be where I was, and so was Gar. I think we all were. Mustaine had a vision, and he was driven, and you got to have that guy in a band. And I was just lucky to be, part of that team.
You think about like how everything starts, and what if you were playing a different bass riff that night? You weren't playing Jamie's Crying. What if Dave didn't come upstairs?
Oh, shit.
What if all these things didn't happen? Like, you just think about those little itty bitty things, like, a left turn. If you went this way, how life would have been different. Think about that.
So, you think about, we call it, so I grew up a Lutheran kid on the farm, right? Nothing overly, wacky religious or anything. And then, I got sobered up off drugs in 1990. So that sort of brings you back to a belief in something higher, bigger than all of this, right? And and that's a private journey for each of us, right? But there is that thing, and I love a saying that I heard ago. They said, when it's odd, it's God. Meaning, if nothing else, it's unexplainable, right? It's beyond human comprehension, and that to me is, when I was 16 years old, I was playing with my band on the farm in Minnesota where I grew up. And it hit me. This was like a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon, one of the sheds on the farm that my dad would let us practice in. It hit me like a ton of bricks, just out of nowhere. I went, I got to get to California. Unwavering. I went up into the house that night and said, hey, I'm going to dye my hair blonde, get an earring. I'm moving to California. And I was 16, right? And they're like, yeah, slow down there, little fighter. But you know what? I was at that moment, I just knew. And ever since I picked up a bass, when I heard rock and roll on the radio and when I was 10, 11 years old, I knew. I was like, I no longer want to be a fireman or a doctor or whatever, a little kid wants to be. I was like, I want to do that, And Kiss were my Beatles, just because of my age. I missed the Beatles, really, But in fact, when I was listening to the radio, Paul McCartney and Wings were on the radio, right? So we all have our hero, right? And Kiss was that band that's, it's like coming to a Comic-Con, right? They were the band that was bigger than all of this, there was something about that. But so here I'm at 16, and then I just pursued it. And then, like I said, when I found out Musicians Institute was out there, I thought, man, this is my path. I could go out, I could go to school if I need to. I just need a vehicle to get to California because that's where it was going on, hell, at that point, Motley Crue was in Hustler magazine. I was like, okay, it's definitely all going on out in California, But, so I think there's, I've heard it said, you can be driven or you can be led, and they may look the same, but the intention is very different, and we were talking about it the other day. We've been blessed to make money, all these things, but it's like, if just getting famous is the goal, man, it's a rough road, Go ahead.
When I was a kid, I asked God, I said, God, please make me a famous guitar player. Let me be a great guitar player. I should have said, let me be a rich, famous guitar player. But he answered my prayer. All I wanted to do was be like Jeff Beck. I just wanted that. I didn't care about girls or money. I just wanted to be that kind of a guitar player. And what you said before, like if I play a note, people turn their head. Stu told me that one time. I was playing with my brother's band, and he said, Chris, when you started playing, everybody in the room turned around.
Yeah.
So, and even back when I was home, people said that. So I had a little bit of confidence, about my playing really early in life, but I got what I asked for, and I should have asked for this.
Should ask for the money. See if you can rub the genie bottle. By the way, can you include the cash, please? Go ahead.
Something you guys have already been covering, but I come from a musical family. I'm the only one who's not talented, and all of my friends growing up were as well. And they would have like the garage band thing going on, where it's all these people are together this week, and then they drop these two, and they would have a new name, and go through it. And the same with my uncle's band. All of his friends are, they play this group together and this group together. You guys have kind of the similar thing going on a much grander scale. And as you go, you just keep getting more and more and more people to play with. Are there any like things where it's like, we don't play with these people? There are certain lines that don't get crossed, or can you pretty much, for the sake of the music, just be like, man, we can all get together and play this and play this? And what's it like to decide like who's going to come together and record what little?
That's a really good question. I think, okay, like for instance, when we were starting Megadeth, there was a very clear path. And Dave, to his credit, he knew, so I'm a kid who grows up in the farm. I'm hearing about all these great nightclubs like the Starwood and the Whiskey and these cool clubs in L.A., just like, in New York, there was Max's Kansas City and CBGB's and, the cool places to play that our heroes all played, right? Mm-hmm. So I get out there and I meet Dave, and he goes, "We're not playing any clubs in L.A. L.A. sucks." And I'm like, whoa, crushing my dreams immediately, right? But he goes, because from his days in Metallica, they had relocated to San Francisco. And as Chris had said, from the clubs in San Francisco, there was really a scene up there. And he was definitely a budding star in that scene. And that was the place to go for us to debut the band, right? But to back a couple of months for that, as we're auditioning singers, auditioning musicians for the band, probably even me, when Dave met me, all right, a leather jacket, long hair, I looked like I was thinking along the right path, right? And so I remember auditioning singers, and these guys, one guy was like this Billy Idol kind of guy. He's like, that's not going to work. He was British, and I love Billy Idol, but it's not the right thing, right? And and back to having a voice, there's already one Billy Idol, and there will only ever be one, and he's the guy. I mean, he's like the Elvis of that world, of that punk rock world. I mean, that's how great he is, But, then other singers would come, they'd have their scarves, and they're looking all cool and doing their thing, and it's just kind of, they can sing, they're mechanically, they're good enough to do something, but they just don't have the heart for it. So I think as you're putting something together, and even if you're making a record, Nashville are the kings of this, right? Record label signs him, he's the singer, but then we're going to go down the street to the music publisher to get the songs, and then he's going to be the producer. It's an assembly line, right? And there's a group of musicians who play on all those records because they play really well together. And if you need that, hey, let's get Chris Poland to play because that's a sound, but he's only going to do this one part of this one song because that's all we need him for. And then we're going to have that guy play the rest of the guitar on the album, and that's kind of how it is. They cherry pick the people to play certain parts of it. So in the business of music, you're essentially creating something. You're creating a product you're trying to sell, right? So you go after, okay, what's our audience? And lots of times the singer, the star of the show, it's like, okay, this person connects. He can really, again, the Elvis thing, right? And there's something that is attractive to many people, and that's when they go, we can sell this. This is a product.
I don't know if this answers your question, but I'm home one day. Andy Somers, Megadeth's old agent, calls me up and he goes, and his nickname for me was Carl. He's like, "Hey, Carl, can you play bass?" And I said, "Yeah, I can play bass. Maybe." He goes, if you want to play bass, you want to play bass in a punk rock band? And I'm like, "Oh, shit, I could do that." So he goes, "The Circle Jerks are having an audition, but you have to audition." And I went and I auditioned and I got the gig. And when I was in line, all the bass players are like, "Dude, what are you doing here?" And I had a pink bass because that's the only bass I could borrow. And it was bright pink. It was a BC Rich Eagle bass. It was so hideous. And I think they liked that. I think they were like, "That's ballsy." So anyway, I got the gig, but that kind of is what you were saying is like from a fusion thing, from a band that invented thrash metal to playing in a punk rock band. It's just whatever comes your way, I guess.
Very cool. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? Nothing that's gnawing at you?
Anybody have any tax problems?
This is more for Dave, Because I don't know if you were on the Rude Awakening tour.
No.
But,
Yeah, that was 2001. Yeah.
okay. I was just wondering about Jimmy DeGrasso, if he was just a hired gun for that tour. And what
No, Jimmy was. It's funny. So Jimmy DeGrasso comes in and replaces Nick Menza, who for about 10 years, Nick and Marty Friedman were in Megadeth. It was a really prolific and commercially successful era of the group through the 90s. And challenging. You know, a lot of different music came along, Seattle music, new metal, a lot of people cutting their hair, you know, changing. I remember when it was not cool, Megadeth and Metallica, it's like pointy letters in the logo were out. So the Lego, suddenly they're kind of rounded, you know, pointy guitars. So everybody starts playing Les Pauls, you know, and stuff. So, but, you know, Jimmy DeGrasso, he had been in Suicidal Tendencies on, I think, the Countdown to Extinction tour. They supported us in America. Dave became friends with him, hired him to play on a one-off record called MD45. And Jimmy's great, you know, schooled musician. He went to Musicians Institute in Hollywood, so great player. Had been in, you know, Suicidal, was playing in Alice Cooper's band, and Dave liked him and wanted to get him in the band, and I was holding on to the four of us, you know, me, Dave, Nick, and Marty, like, you know, Gene, Paul, Ace, and Peter, like Kiss. When you've got magic, man, don't let that magic go. I remember watching a Kiss thing where Gene's talking about that. Ace Frehley wanted to make a solo, wanted to leave and make a solo album. He goes, do not leave. I'm telling you. Dude, don't, like, not for us, but also for you, don't leave. We'll all afford to do solo albums. You know, anything to keep it going, you know, because tell you, when you break it up, man, it's hard to ever, even after Gar and Chris were gone from Megadeth, it's like, oh my God, are we ever going to get this back on the track again, you know? So finally, you know, Nick's health was such that he needed some time, you know, right? So we brought Jimmy in. He was very much a band member. In fact, I remember he joined the band and we said, hey, congratulations, here's your share of the debt, you know, because it would have been better to be a sideman, you know? So it's like, you know, joining a band is like buying like a donut shop or a hotel, or it's like, yeah, we're profitable, but we've got a whole bunch of debt too, you know? So owning rock bands is, you know, it's risky business for sure, you know? But, yeah, he was, and I'm still great friends with Jimmy. You know, we talk all the time, and you know, he's had a lot of great gigs. He went back to Alice Cooper after that Rude Awakening thing, after the band broke up. But yeah, Jimmy's great, and a very different feel, very different from Nick. And it was awkward because he's really like a perfect drummer. His timing is good, his meter's good. I was talking to Jakey Lee because, you know, he was in the band when they were writing the Ultimate Sin album. And Jimmy told me stories about that. He and Bob Daisley and Jakey Lee, they were over in England with Ozzy writing the Ultimate Sin, and you know, he was there for a while and then he wasn't, you know, and just like Bob Daisley was there for a while and then he wasn't, and it kind of, you know, and you know, look, at the end of the day, it was Ozzy's name on the door. You know, everybody was expendable. It was a rotating thing because you know, he was Elvis. He was the star. You know, so you when you know pragmatically, as Chris and I do now, in the business, it's like just like the Circle Jerks. You want to play bass for a tour? Sure. You know, it doesn't mean you're a member. You're just playing bass for it. You're helping them out. You know, like when I played with Overkill. Hey, can you go to South America? You know, sure, no problem. And, you know, we talked about maybe doing more, but then my schedule conflicted, and it, you know, it just, that was it. It was a month of our lives. It was a lot of fun. We're friends, and life moves on, you know.
Well, I'd definitely like to see an Overkill, Megadeth, and King Diamond tour for sure.
Could happen.
Old school.
Could happen. Yeah.
So we've got probably 5 or 6 minutes left, but I think we would be very not respectful to a project that you guys were both involved with if we don't talk about it, and that is the Nick Menza documentary that came out. That, if you don't know, Nick was, they've been speaking about Nick, an amazing drummer. You guys put together a documentary about his life, and if you haven't seen it, it is gut-wrenching, it's emotional, you will cry, you will be so sad, but it is an amazing watch. Like, you'll feel so good about everything after you watch it because he had such an amazing outlook. Tell us a little bit about that, like putting it together and your parts in that.
I just got to say, if you watch the movie, you will know Nick Menza personally. You'll be like a friend. And when it's a great movie. And it's not sad for me until it got to the part where we talked about what happened. But up until then, it's amazingly uplifting and tells the story, and Dave narrates it, and it's hilarious. And then, when you get off, at the end of the movie, you're going to be glad you saw it. It's a really amazing movie.
Where can we watch this?
So we have the DVDs for the Blu-ray for sale at our booth. It is going to be available eventually on some type of streaming service, a Tubi or something like that. But for right now, Bayview Entertainment, who is releasing the product, they produced a bunch of Blu-rays. They gave us some so that we could have here at the show as well. Yeah, Nick, I kind of got to know him at the beginning of because really Megadeth was his big upswing of his career, right? So I got to work with him during that phase, and then Chris worked with him sort of in the later and final days. So it's interesting how we both got different experiences. We got the same guy, but two different and musically different parts as well of Nick. And Nick's dad, Don Menza, is an incredible. I mean, I actually want to make a documentary of his life because he has he's a jazz musician, played with Buddy Rich, Louis Bellson, and he's known as. I was talking to my friend Steve Bailey over at Berkeley College, and they've got, I think, one of Don's friends Don's 89. One of his friends is 91 and teaches at Berkeley. He's a sax player, right? And Berkeley, of course, is a jazz college. So that's the world that he comes from. And is just an esteemed musician. Just sitting down and talking to Don, this is like talking to Jimmy Page. This guy, he's written and arranged for Buddy Rich, Pink Panther, that's him. He played with Henry Mancini. Yeah, that's Don, right? So, I mean, Don is badass. Nick would come out on tour and he'd go, yeah, Pavarotti was over at the house last night having dinner, it's just, networked in with all these different people. He played, Don Menza didn't play with Toto. He played with their fathers, who were like even more badass than Toto. You know what I mean? They were, these guys were, I should say, more badass, but of a different, they were like jazz and played in all kinds of different stuff. And I mean, so he's just got an incredible story himself. And some of his story is told in the Nick Menza documentary. It's really a great backstory there.
Great. So the good news is you get to spend time with these guys for the next couple days. If you don't know where we are, if you walk out on the left-hand or right-hand side, you'll see a TARDIS. That means you went two tables too far. Right there. Or just follow the crowd. You guys have been busy all. It was insane. The show opened, and it was flies to honey. It's so awesome to see it. People just wanting to talk and find out more and share their stories. And if you have questions that you were a little nervous to ask in a crowd, please come up. That's why we're here. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you guys there.
I always thought it was weird that you guys were out in the hallway. You guys too awesome and metal to be in there with all the comic book hipsters.
Perfect spot.
I do too. Yeah. Concession stands right next door.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Excelsior!